Well, hello, Faith Church. Welcome to this week's midweek devotional. This past Sunday, Rick reminded us how names used to mean something and how the name of Jesus is significant because he was the one who was going to rescue or save his people. And most recently, I read another account where God had changed the name of Jacob from Jacob to Israel. And it's interesting because Jacob was the kind of person who had kind of this questionable past. He did a lot of questionable things in his life. Beginning with swindling his brother out of his birthright over a bowl of soup, and then with that same brother deceiving their father into taking the blessing of the firstborn son, so that Jacob would receive it as the secondborn over his brother. And of course, that made his brother Esau angry. And so then Jacob had to flee for fear of his own life. And as he was away, he was married. He worked for his father-in-law, Laban. And eventually, things went awry with Laban. And Jacob again had to flee and run from his father-in-law. And as Jacob then was returning back to his homeland, knowing he would have to confront his brother again, still fearing for his own life, he set up these things to hopefully soften his brother's response. And he sent gifts ahead of him. He sent his family off ahead of him, all the while hoping it would soften Esau's response to Jacob. And in Genesis 32 is where this account takes place. And it says that Jacob had taken his wife and his wives and kids, and crossed this river and set up camp with them. But he himself went back to the other side of the river and spent the night. And I can't help but wonder, did he do that just so if this softening didn't work, there was this river barrier that he could again run? But in that moment, God met him there. And it says that Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not be defeated, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. "Your name will no longer be Jacob," he said. "It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he answered, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. And so as I think about that, that struggle, Jacob's hip was dislocated. So now he was in a spot where he really couldn't run. He couldn't run away from Esau if he wanted to because he was injured. He would not get away. And he wrestled with God to the point where he received God's blessing. And not only that, but as we saw through Jesus' genealogy, that Jesus comes from that line of Jacob, that line of now Israel. And Jesus is that ultimate blessing and the fulfillment of blessing. And so as I think about Jacob's life, I kind of reflect on my own circumstances at times. Have there been times where I remember times where things have been difficult, where there's been weakness or circumstances that have either presented an opportunity for me to shrink back or flee, or to wrestle with God and to see his power at work within me, to be able to receive God's blessing and to be a blessing to others, to allow God's light to shine forth through me. And one of those moments that I was recalling, I remember this needy individual was introduced to me. And we had some things in common. So it was like, hey, you spent time with this individual who needs a friendship, who needs mentorship. That's how it was presented to me. He was introduced to me, and I thought to myself, God, I do not have time for this person. This person is needy. They're going to drain me. I got 100 other things going on. And it would have been very easy for me to not wrestle with what God had brought to me, to just ignore it and to shrink back and continue on my way. But I wrestled with God, and I allowed God's power in my weakness to not only be a blessing to this individual, but also became a blessing to me. And that's kind of what I think was going on with Jacob as he wrestled with God. And Paul also shares it this way to the Corinthians in his second letter. Says, Paul, concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it would leave me. This was his burden, right? That it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So my hope for you is that you would truly take these things to heart, that you would see your circumstances or your weaknesses and choose to wrestle with God and allow God's grace to be sufficient for you, that you would allow his power to be at work in your weaknesses, to not only to be a blessing to you, to let his light shine on you, but to be a blessing to others and allow God's light to shine and bless others.